Story 1. Tired Eyes. I was 15 when it happened. My sister was 5. It started on her 5th birthday when she received one of those dolls that's supposed to look like the owner. It was a standard doll, the same height as my sister, red hair, freckles. It even came with an outfit matching its own for my sister. The only out of the ordinary part were its eyes. My sister had very strange eyes, blue with flecks of brown near the pupil. I used to tease her they looked like toilet bowls with poop floating in them. I'd never seen another person with eyes like this, but the dolls matched them perfectly. I don't recall who gave her the doll, but I thought whoever it was had taken the time to repaint the eyes as a special touch. After she opened gifts, my sister and her friends began running around, dressing up the usual little kid stuff. I, not wanting to get stuck babysitting, snuck off to my room and shut the door. I was immersed in a scary story I was reading when I heard the door creak open. Naturally, and considering what I was reading, I flipped my shit and turned around as fast as I could. Sitting nudged between the mostly shut door and the frame was my sister's doll. Had there not been a gang of little kids in my house, I might have gotten a bit scared, but I was sure one or all of them had placed it there as a prank. I brought the doll back downstairs, and that was the last I heard of it for a few months, save for my sister's stories and packing it around with her constantly. 2 months later, things got weird. My sister ran downstairs one day screaming that her doll was being mean to her, knowing it was just her imagination. But no wanting to upset her, I firmly reprimanded the doll in front of her, then put it on the top shelf of my sister's closet. She seemed satisfied that justice had been served, and I was a bit glad not to see that thing around anymore. It was a bit creepy how much it looked like my sister. I thought of the times I'd seen her asleep with it and wondered if I could even tell the difference in the dark. But that was beside the point, because without my parents' help the doll would be trapped in the closet, and I certainly wouldn't be taking it down. Later that night, I heard my sister screaming. I ran into the room to see the doll at the foot of her bed. It wasn't even leaning on something, just standing there, staring at her. I grabbed the doll and bolted down the stairs. My parents came out to see me going down and asked what was going on, but I didn't stop to explain. I stuffed the doll in our trash can. The blue and brown eyes stared up at you, almost in an angry way. When I went back inside, my sister was back asleep, having been calmed down by my parents, and I was glad to be done with the ordeal, or so I thought. The next morning, as I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, I saw my sister at my door. I blinked at my blurry morning sight, and when I opened my eyes again, she was gone. I walked to her room only to see her sound asleep. Odd, I thought. It must have been a trick of the eye, but later that night it happened again. I was awoken by footsteps, and saw what I thought was my sister standing just outside my door. I turned to switch the light on, only to see there was no one there. Once again she was fast asleep in her room, and I checked. The garbage hadn't yet been picked up, so I decided to check the bin tomorrow morning. Maybe my dad was playing tricks on me. The next morning, as I suspected, the trash was empty. While we ate breakfast, I confronted my dad. "Dad, did you put Jane's doll outside my room last night or this morning?" I asked. "What? Don't be stupid. That doll's out in the trash where you left it." "No, I checked. It wasn't there." "Well, maybe some kids saw it and wanted it for themselves. How should I know where the damn thing went?" That was the end of the matter. Strange, but I shrug it off. God, I regret that. That night my sister was scared, so I agreed to stay in her room. All night we heard terrible things, whispers, and laughs I swear were in my sister's voice, footsteps above and around us. We were petrified. But soon enough the noises stopped and sleep outweighed fear. I dreamed of the doll sneaking into the room with us. But in my dream, it occurred to me that ripping the doll's head off would stop it. To this day I don't know where I got that thought, but I wish I hadn't. I awoke to see the doll lying next to my sister in her bed, but I thought I knew what I needed to do. I grabbed the doll in the dark and held it down. I remember it felt heavier than I remembered. I grabbed hold of the hair, so lifelike, and pulled as hard as I could. I looked into the doll's eyes. I had to pull harder than I thought to get the head off the doll, and it looked as if there were fear in its eyes. Finally, there was a sickening rip, and the head popped off. I smiled, only then realizing how tired I was. I laid down, kicking the head and body away so I could sleep. I woke to the sound of screaming. My mother was hysterical. I saw her run into the room, her face covered in tears. I looked around me. I was surrounded by blood. It was on the floor and on my hands. My mother continued to shriek as she held the doll's head close to her chest. Why was she so upset? I'd saved us. Where was all this blood coming from? I looked around, and lying in my sister's bed, I saw the doll. Story 2. I met someone who makes me feel seasick. The water is perfect at this time of night. Shanna lifted her long, white dress over her thin shoulders and dipped under the cool depths of Lake Diamond. Don't be such a baby, Freeman. We didn't come out here at 2 a.m. for nothing. She smiled when she spoke. I love that. After 5 months of sulking through Stanford High's senior year, Shanna looked so absolutely amazing when she finally just smiled. It was stupidly simple. Not too hot, not too warm, the Goldilocks zone. She tilted her tendrils of waterlogged black hair to the side, attempting to shake some of the fresh lake out of her ears as she floated effortlessly in the waves. You know the reference. I did. They say something lives at the bottom of this lake. Have you heard that story? I did. She lowered her shy green eyes with a sly grin as she spit some water at me. It's real deep here. Most people don't even know how deep. I peeled off my shirt and stepped over the missing planks of the old wooden dock. Did you know that? She asked. I did. Well, Mr. Freeman, it does appear you knew everything. Shanna replied with a shocked shout. I do, I replied, right before jumping in like a cannonball, shamelessly spraying some water into her eyes. I reached out to grab her, and she played like she was putting up a fight. I kissed her neck softly, and it tasted like perfume and sweat. Are you scared to be in here tonight, Mikey? She asked while staring straight ahead, as if in response to the words. A weak wind started to pick up in the willow trees surrounding the coast. The branches swung back and forth lazily as a storm started to pass through. Tiny droplets of rain and discarded leaves dotted the lazily drifting waves as we struggled to stay above the surface. A little, I admitted. My mom used to say I get seasick. You can't get seasick on a lake, Michael, Shanna said in a daze as she stared at something beyond the shore. Did you know people have died here? I didn't. It was never in the papers, so you don't know everything. Her tone turned cold and lonely. My great-grandfather did. In 1875, he was swimming here in the middle of the night, the same as he had done 1,000,000 times before, same as we are doing now." She paused. "This shitty dock is ours, after all. His wife always said he needed to get more use out of it." "Sounds like a good reason to get out of the lake, Shanna," I said, insistent and confused. "Let's fucking go." She stared at me from the bottom of the ladder and shook her head. She was soaking wet and stunned by the significance of something I could not see beyond the trees. "He drowned. I was with him." "What are you talking about? Grandpa told me he could do it." "We saw a bright light under the waves. It was so warm. It was beautiful and comforting and perfect all at the same time. But so strange. Where did it come from? What did it want?" "It was like somebody turned on a heater on the lake floor. It didn't make any sense. Nothing she said was making sense anymore. I was just an innocent 17-year-old kid, hoping to score with the hottest girl in school. I wanted to touch it. The light. Grandpa said he would swim to the bottom to get it for me." He held his breath real big and went to look. "Like this." Shanna disappeared. "Motherfucker. This is not funny." I screamed to the empty night. I looked around, and no one was nearby. I reached underwater and caught a flailing foot. She surfaced with entangled limbs and hopeful screams. "Can you see it?" She slapped me in the face as I tried to pull her away from the waves. "Look." I did. A bright luminescence lit up underneath the surface. It was absurd, and exactly as she described. The light encompassed every inch of the storm-fused lake. I leapt onto the deck and grabbed Shanna by the arm. As I started to pull her towards me, she pulled back with surprising force. I landed back in the water with a belly flop. She wrapped her thin arms around my shoulders. "Grandpa never came back." "I hope you do." Shanna kissed me, the same as she had done 1,000 times. But something was different. Her lips were dry and crackled. A warm and sticky liquid flooded over her teeth and into my mouth. I opened my eyes and spit out the liquid. It was blood, redder than her underwear. Then she dunked my head without any explanation. The light was pulsating at that point. I could see it even through closed eyes. I screamed, but water filled my lungs. After it felt like there was no fight in me left, something relented as I broke the surface, but the face in front of mine was not the one I recognized. She still wore the same bikini top. It was crimson red, with tiny little hearts rounding the corners, but the skin behind it was old and gray. Layers of it raised up to form complicated wrinkles on her chest and arms. Her teeth were decaying, and that illustrious black hair was falling out by the root. As I looked into her eyes, they were still the same color green. "I need the light, Mike. Go get me that fucking light." Even her voice was different. It was tired, old, and angry. A neighbor must have heard the commotion. He opened his door from a few hundred feet away and called out into the dark, "Are you kids all right? It is too late for swimming. Nitrogen monoxide." I shouted back, "Please help me." When I turned to face Shanna, she was gone. The lake was dark again. A dive crew searched Diamond's grounds for hours. They never found my girlfriend or anything that suggested an electrical source. The body of a deceased senior citizen washed up on shore the next morning. I kept my mouth shut, even though the reveal answered my own haunting question for sure. Shanna really did need the light that night. Story 3. Oceanic Absurdity. An account of nautical horror. A bestial tentacle breached the surface with a tremendous display of aquamarine power. The resultant shower of water rained down in a torrent upon the deck, drenching the observing passenger. A groan, impossibly deep, reverberated from the waters, an ancient guttural bellow that shook the 3,000-ton ship. At near full erection, the tentacle towered over the vessel at an imposing for 100 feet in height, with a width of about a sixth of that, and a thickness of proportion equal to several of the ship's decks stacked together. The colossal appendage weighed no less than several thousands of tons, and if brought down on the ship, would surely bisect it from sheer weight alone, regardless of how much force was applied to its descent. If the physical proportions of the anomalous creature adhered to those of its lesser-sized yet scientifically classified kin, it would seemingly exist on a scale beyond even fictionally fathomable extremes of cephalopod life. 3 columns intersected by innumerable rows of relatively small, suctioning protrusions extended from the meaty colossus, though no sound could be heard, each bowl-shaped nodule clenched and unclenched in excitement, or possibly thirst, while the great appendage to which they were attached merely swayed with apparent disinterest at the vessel it dwarfed. Observing with a sense of near-maddening fear from the real topmost deck an elderly man, dwelling in the blurred twilight between 60 and 70, conjured a scene of Lovecraftian quality. The tentacle, obviously an extension of a greater body, would probably at least maintain a proportional reality consistent with its presented immensity. Despite the horrific nature of it, there had yet to appear any suggestions of a paranormal origin, leading to the conclusion that nature had simply produced a terrifying anomaly. Going by this strain of logic, the man then speculated with a summation based on the observation that only half of the full appendage had cleared the water, that whatever creature existed below the surface, probing the waterless realm, held claim to a truly monstrous immensity. Its body would have to weigh countless tons, possibly of comparable weight to the surrounding water its presence displaced. For sustenance it would have needed to feed on either a genocidal amount of exponentially smaller beings or a few like-sized ones. The nightmarish contemplation strained the wizened mind of the near-centennial, and he soon fell to a defeated heap on the deck, as if sensing its effortless victory over the will of its audience. The tentacle began writhing in morbid excitation. The nodule-ridden underbelly began undulating in a rhythm that suggested the regurgitation of some substance, but no mouth existed for a projectile to exit. Instead, to the horror of the helpless onlooker, the tentacle lowered towards the ship, gradually shadowing the entire surface, stopping just inches from the wooden paneling of the flooring, and mere centimeters from the man's face. The tentacle seemingly froze with an unexpected rigidity. Stunned by both fear and relief, the men remained under the claim of the once encroaching tendril. After what felt like an eonic passage of seconds, the tentacle, in a truly disgusting dematerialization, lost what could only be described as structural integrity of a biological nature. Instantaneous cellular decomposition plagued the thing, degrading its entire form with a rapidity never before seen in an animal of land or sea. It simply diffused into an almost gaseous suspension of particles before dispersing to nothingness by wave-borne winds, an estimated weight of thousands of tons evaporating into ether by divine intervention or some inexplicable agent of physiological deconstruction. Oh, thank God Almighty! Exulted the man saved from the colossal horror once set on besieging his ship. Although still afflicted by the subsistent tremblings of trauma, he had regained a comfortable sanity. He rose to his feet and approached the railing, curious not only of the fate of the creature, but also if any salvageable parts floated to the surface for collection and presentation. At that moment, the concepts of optimism, happiness, and a man-dominated world were immediately ejected from his mind. Through the partial transparency of the water he witnessed an enormous fang detach from a dissolving form. After a few more seconds of diminishment, the waters were completely clear and brought a bleakly grave elucidation below the creature that planned to destroy the man's ship. Existed a much larger thing, a grand horror that did not even care to abide by a general anatomical framework, a mass of absurdly large limbs, features, and inexpressible tangents. A body that seemed to only serve a lethal purpose hovered below. At its center, which spanned a diameter round the vessel of comparable ratio to the earth, set in the center of the sunset, and I embedded in a cavity of abyssal darkness. The pupil, a red sun of dismal focus, gleamed with a fiery luminescence that would shame the greatest conflagrations of hell. A staggering heat radiated from the depths of the water, yet did not cause it to boil. A hatred transcending the once stark barrier of ocean and air. Whether he came to the conclusion of his own cognition or by the indoctrination of that impossible entity, it is not certain. He conjectured that this aqua-god was the true procreator of all earthen life. If the academic's claim of life arising from the primordial organisms of the sea held any merit, this creature could reasonably have been the progenitor of those azoic life forms. Beset by a dismal recognition, the man surrendered to the sovereignty of the god as if resistance was even an option, and allowed his mind to unravel at the obscene morbidity before him. As unconsciousness dawned, he laughed to himself when a final irony became apparent to him. The first threat, the mammoth octopus-like thing that reared a lone appendage, was probably the prey of the abysmal abomination beneath it. A foe that could rival a conglomerate of naval fleets was mere food to a much more sinister entity. Just when you think you've seen the apex form of horror, a greater depravity trumps it. This momentary lapse into humor gave the man a grim peace of mind that allowed him to ignore the growing intensity of that already fierce stare. In those last moments of existence he expelled a deep, resonant laughter as the visible horizon of ocean instantly evaporated and was replaced by a rising hellscape of sanguine flame. Story 4. Daniel. He was running. He had to avoid detection. He was test subject to 7B. Heading back was no longer an option. His name was Daniel, but that didn't matter. No one ever used names, not even the civil protection officers. He ran along a wall near the east entrance. The guards in the watchtowers scanned the surface of the land, looking for anything unusual. Daniel kept close to the ground. He could smell the green oats that were eye level to him. No time. The sirens went off, and he was leaping from his resting place. They must have found the tunnel. He ran quickly and silently, gradually closer to the gate that was populated with civil protection units. If Daniel had to kill, he would. There was no stopping a man that was so near to escaping the vilest of prisons. He was roughly 30 feet away from the guard building. The sun shone on the dusty window pane. He looked around at the ground and picked up a small pebble and a fist-sized rock. He crept closer to the small shack at which the guards checked papers for incoming and outgoing vehicles. He tossed the small pebble against a parked car underneath the shade of a pine tree. The low ding sound attracted one of the 3 guards. He crept up to the officer that was hanging out on the side of the shack and raised his rock. Stone collided with bone, and immediately all thoughts inside the guard's head ceased. Daniel dragged the guard behind the shack and took out the nightstick, handcuffs, and the 10mm pistol. He peeked around the corner of the shack to find the guards had given up their search of the pebble sound and had continued soliciting. There was no time to waste. He knew that patrol cars could ride up any minute. He had practiced with weapons before. It was part of testing. He shuddered. Without hesitation, he pulled out his 10mm handgun and fired a bullet straight through the brain of one of the guards, rather rudely ending their conversation. He then aimed at a gasoline can and made it leak. Daniel took a moment to appreciate the power of a gun. The guard, being extremely frightened and confused due to his inability to find a target, began shooting in random directions until he ran out of ammunition. Daniel pulled the trigger once more, and the officer found himself with a bullet in his kneecap. How unfortunate. Daniel walked over to the guard as he screamed to Daniel, "You filthy dog. You don't deserve to live." Daniel pulled out the handcuffs. Once the guard was secured to the bike rack, Daniel lit him on fire. Due to the fact that his pant legs already contained traces of gasoline, he went up in flames. Daniel fled the scene, sprinting towards the woods. He would be safe in there, away from everything. He strayed far from the road and eventually forgot completely which direction was in. All the better, Daniel thought. He had never been able to appreciate the wonders of nature, mostly because he had been held captive inside that testing facility all his life. No longer would other test subjects or officers refer to him as test subject to 7B. He was a free man. He was Daniel. After precariously drinking from a stream, he picked a random direction and followed it. Memories of his tests still flowed through his mind. Supposedly, they were just simulations and capability tests, such as blowing up children and shooting elderly people, training tests designed to desensitize people. But he knew that they were real. The pleas and screams sounded so real. The blood that splashed across his face, and he was forced to hack the limbs off of a pregnant woman, was real. All the other test subjects just went with it. None of them cared, but Daniel did. He had thought that by escaping the facility, he would be able to escape the feeling of being watched. But it didn't work. If anything, he felt like he was under close examination, as though Daniel emancipating himself was part of the plan. Sometimes he would hide behind a tree or run faster in zigzags, hopelessly trying to avoid watch. He wanted to rid himself of those memories, to start fresh, but he couldn't. He wanted to live a normal life, but the problem was he didn't know what normal really was. He tried to imagine normal, but after hours of trying, he gave up. Daniel kept walking, mainly because it rid him of the pain. Suddenly, he stopped. He realized there, in that very thick of the woods, that Daniel had no food. He didn't even know what food looked like, let alone where to find it. He knew how vulnerable he was. It was after midnight and he was hungry. He didn't know what to do. He started running. He ran and he ran until he could run no more. He was lost and afraid. He could die out here. What was he thinking? He was clueless. There were no nourishment cubes to be eaten out here. He didn't know what was edible and what wasn't. Then, out of the darkness, he saw it, the wall. Instinctually, he ran towards it, hoping it would provide him with his needs. The gray wall came closer and closer, until Daniel realized that it wasn't a wall, it was a limit. He started panicking. He ran along the wall for miles, looking frantically for an exit. He took a rock and hit the wall repeatedly. It became obvious that it was impenetrable. It was an infinite barrier, a divider between him and freedom. It never ended. He realized it at that moment. There were no civil protection officers. There were no test subjects. No innocent children or women that he so unwillingly murdered. Only him. It was always him. Others would say that this is crazy, but deep down in his subconscious, he knew it to be true. It was all just another test, a simulation. Daniel started crying. Was anything real? He woke up. Everything was dark. He looked around and saw nothing. From the dark, he heard a voice, cold and unrelenting. "Welcome back, Daniel." He was shocked. "Daniel?" he whispered to himself. No one ever used names. Story 5, The Second Coming. It's been a week since the program started, a program that I thought would be the easiest way to make 50 grand within a week. But things turned to shit on the third day of a project called The Second Coming. 18 people were involved in the project. 8 of us were observers. I was one of the observers, and our role was simple. We were gathered together in one room where we were to watch dozens of monitors that displayed everything going on in a makeshift town, one created for the program. If there was anything noteworthy going on, we would all write a little note about it. At the end of the day, we would read our notes out loud. It's funny how different our perspective of every event was. 9 of the people were placed in the town as residents. Their role was simple as well. All they had to do was live like they normally do. Food, water, shelter, and entertainment was provided. The first couple of days I was pretty jealous. Being an observer was downright boring most of the time. It seemed, at the time, that I had drawn the short end of the stick. Last but certainly not least, we had our Jesus. His role was not simple. He was the only one that had a direct line of communication with the people running the project, and they would let him know when it was time for him to create another miracle. The person they picked to take on the Jesus role was a wiry little guy, a bit shorter than average, with a body structure that matched that of a single chopstick. He had a squeaky voice and always looked to be dirty, even after bathing. His name was Chad, and his appearance was far from impressive. The residents did not know about this fake Jesus shit. They were even given a completely different name for the program. For all they knew, this whole thing could have been one giant sleep study or something of the like. It's safe to say they weren't prepared for the coming days. The first 3 days were completely normal. The residents got to know each other. That night, a couple of them even paired up and went to sleep together. It doesn't take a genius to know what they were doing. The second and third days were so boring that I found myself dozing off half the time, along with most of the other observers. The fourth day started off normal enough, but around 3 in the afternoon, Chad performed his first miracle. It wasn't really anything marvelous, just a simple parlor trick that shouldn't have duped a bunch of adults on the first try. But I suppose the people chosen to be residents in this experiment weren't the sharpest group of people. They were all eating lunch when a woman started waving her arms frantically. Chad was face down in the middle of the swimming pool. When the other residents ran over, Chad stood up and walked on the surface of the water towards everyone. A couple of them fell on their knees, while the others just stood in shock. I don't really know how to describe the events of the next 4 days any differently and how I recorded them in my notes, so I'll just copy them down here. Day 4. Chad was talking with one of the male residents. Everything seemed fine until the resident suddenly collapsed. It didn't take long for the others to run over to them. Chad stared at the ground for a moment before kneeling down and touching the man on the forehead. Almost immediately, the guy jumped to his feet, good as new, honestly. I don't know how they did it. This is definitely a lot harder of a miracle to pull off than the one he performed the previous day. Day 5, we noticed a female resident standing atop a tall building. Neither me nor the other observers saw how she got up there. We watched in horror as she launched herself off of the building. Down below, a pool of blood oozed around her lifeless body as Chad and the other residents slowly walked over to the gory scene. Chad knelt down next to her and whispered a couple of words into her ear. She opened her eyes and, with a dazed look on her face, sat up and looked around at the other residents. The observers and I were in utter disbelief. We have absolutely no idea how he could have possibly done that. Day 6, all the residents gathered together early in the morning. They were talking amongst each other. Chad, however, was nowhere to be seen. They all looked to be frightened. When Chad finally showed up, a couple of the residents grabbed him, while the rest tied him up so that he couldn't move. They then took turns kicking, punching, stabbing, and spitting at him for what seemed like half a day. It took a while for Chad to die, but he didn't struggle. Instead, he harbored a knowing smile on his face. They buried his body later in the evening. Day 7. As soon as we turned on the screen, we instantly grew pale with shock. It looked like a massacre. Body parts were thrown around the entire town. Blood was smeared on almost every building, and on the middle screen, with the same smile on his face, was Chad. He was mouthing a phrase over and over again. "I'll be back for you." End journal. He vanished into thin air, and before any of us could react, the room became pitch black. I don't know when I lost consciousness, but I woke up in my bedroom this morning. I eventually checked my bank account and saw that my payment for the experiment was deposited. Still unsure of how I made it back home, I checked my room for inconsistencies. Everything was exactly how I left it, except for a note on my mirror and a small bouquet of white roses at the edge of my bed. Don't worry, I'll give you a couple of days to run as far away as you can. Love, Chad. Story 6. I bought a voodoo doll on eBay. Voodoo doll, highly effective, brand new. 100% cotton, handcrafted voodoo doll. For all your vengeful needs, nitrogen monoxide crafting necessary. Just write your target's name across the chest. No sewing, cutting, or gluing. Warning: do not use this doll to kill or severely injure. The Magical Arts Voodoo doll is designed for inflicting minor wounds only. Woman off the magic calls 66699. 9% positive feedback. I click the big Buy It Now button. Then I drove over to Michael's for some extra long sewing pens and a Sharpie marker. I was going to write Julie Harlow's rotten name all over it. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. They knew my secret. Sarah Harper caught me ogling her in the locker room. She told Kendall Kowalski, who told Julie Harlow, who told everyone. News travels fast in any high school, but an all-girls prep school, I didn't stand a chance. When I entered the locker room, backwards and haphazardly, they stared at me silently as I trudged to my locker. And then the whispers started, but she doesn't look hey. She was looking at my legs, pervert. I heard she only does threesomes. Yeah, that's how those bisexuals are, slut. I felt the tears burn my eyes and threatened to fall, but I took a deep breath and steeled myself against the whispers. They were all rumors, lies, gossip. The only truth in them was that I was, in fact, bisexual. At lunch, I ate alone outside. I was halfway through my sandwich when I heard a voice. Emily, it was Julie Harlow, one of the popular girls. She looked out of place alone on the grass without her usual friends. Can I talk to you? Sure, I said, patting the grass. Next to me, she straightened her skirt and lowered herself gingerly onto the ground. I'm sorry for telling everyone, for the way everyone's been acting towards you. And I want you to know that I, know how you feel. Is she really saying what I think she's saying? I, feel that way about girls, too. I stared at her in shock, and her brown eyes locked with mine. My heart fluttered in my chest. Then she leaned in, just the slightest, tiniest bit. But I understood. I leaned in and kissed her. It was gentle, soft, sweet, so different from any kiss I'd ever gotten from a guy. My arms fell clumsily on her shoulders. I pulled her against me. Her breasts brushed against mine. I felt a surge of, she jerked away, a crooked grin, and my lipstick staining her lips. Julie, she began to laugh. You're a fucking dyke, I knew it. Then she turned to the window, giving a thumbs up. I followed her gaze. There stood half the school, eating their lunch, watching us. Some of the girls were laughing and hollering. Others were pushing away their trays, a look of utter disgust on their faces. Still, others looked absolutely under my skin. Why did you do that? I yelled after her as she sauntered back towards the lunchroom. She shrugged. Why not? And then she disappeared inside. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The package came on Wednesday. I tore it open to find a tiny, humanoid doll inside. It wasn't like the creepy-looking voodoo dolls of old. It was actually quite cute. Two printed eyes, some gender-vague black hair, and a tag along the bottom that read Made in China. I uncapped the Sharpie and wrote Julie Harlow across its chest. Then, for good measure, I wrote her name across the arms, legs, and back. I pulled one of the pens from the box and plunged it into her left leg. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Thursday morning. Julie arrived late. She hobbled into algebra to halfway through the class, limping, wincing, awkwardly lowering herself into a chair near the back. I waited for the laughter, the whispers. They never came. Instead, there was an outpouring of support. Oh my God, Julie, are you okay? What happened to you? Let me help you with your books. I stared incredulously as the girls and Mr. Vassar actually helped her, complimented her, supported her. This was not the revenge I envisioned rage boiled in my blood. As soon as the school bell rang, I raced home. I ran up to my room, grabbed the doll from my dresser, and stared at it with hatred I plucked the pin out of the leg. Then I opened the box and pulled out a handful of pins. 10, 20, maybe more. I didn't stop to count them. In one swift motion, I plunged all of them into her chest. Then I threw the doll on the ground and stomped on it. "That'll teach her," I muttered. Then I felt it. The breath was sucked from my lungs. A crushing, searing pain burst in my chest. I collapsed on the floor. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I woke up to my mother leaning over me. "Oh, my God, Emily!" She wiped away tears. "How are you feeling?" I was lying in a hospital bed. Doctors and nurses shuffled out in the hallway. Beeps filled the room from some sort of monitor. "What happened?" I said, my voice weak. "The doctors say you had some sort of heart attack." She sniffled and tried not to cry. "They don't know." "What caused it? You're so young." Her voice crumbled to sobs. She threw her arms around me. "They might not know what caused it, but I do, because when I got home a few days later, the voodoo doll no longer had the name Julie Harlow written across it. It bore a new name, my name, Story 7. 1-year lease, the basement, gray, concrete, plain. Nothing special about the room at all, and yet lit by bare fluorescent bulbs hanging in an aluminum fixture. It wasn't a particularly shadowy place, and yet shadows seemed to loom just out of the corner of the eye. No matter how often the bulbs were changed, they flickered. The landlord would be called. He'd show up in his battered old work truck. He'd change out the bulbs. He'd leave. Before he would go, he would test the lights when he was there. They'd never flicker. Nothing had really changed in the basement since they moved in. It was stark, nearly empty. Unoccupied metal shelves lined 2 walls. The stairwell down occupied another, and an old Kenmore washer and dryer from the early 80s stood watch over the 4th wall. Beneath the stairs, the central heat blower, furnace, and exchange. Next to the dingy aluminum and steel of the climate control, there were only cobwebs and shadow year-round. The house was cold. When they first took residence in the old 50s ranch style, it was winter. The weather was a convenient and comfortable scapegoat for the chill in the air. But then came summer. They never ran the window unit air conditioners. Scapegoats became less comfortable and convenient. The basement was, of course, the coldest room in the house year-round. Once in January, the water line to the washer actually froze, and the landlord had to replace more than the overhead light. There was no flood damage, since a large rectangular drain occupied the downward-sloping center of the basement floor. That, and the tenants kept nothing in the basement to be damaged. The sounds of water dripping always seemed to come from that steel grate. It was dark, rusty, stained, thick, almost like the sewer grates in a street. Drip, drip, no matter the weather, no matter the time of year. Drip. Her bedroom had an extra air exchange. Floor level, decorative cast iron. The headboard of her bed hid it. If it had been exposed, her frequent guests would have seen that it was painted white and flaking. Hers was always the coldest bedroom, and she could sometimes hear the drips from the basement, like whispers in her pillow. The first 90 days passed uneventfully for the group of friends in that affordable, if a bit run-down-looking, 3-bedroom. They were each single, dating, vibrant, and living the lives of young adults in a city filled with adult playgrounds. On day 91, she lost her keys. They were found sitting on top of the washing machine. It was laughed off, rarely discussed. On day 95, the prude of the house came to knock on her bedroom door at 3:30 a.m. "Christy, hold it down, will you? I'm tired of hearing you fuck," she yelled from the hallway. Confused, Christy opened the door grudgingly. "I'm alone, Tiff. What the hell are you talking about? What? I heard you moaning and banging around in here like you usually do, but louder than usual," Tiffany said. "No, baby, nope. I'm sleeping alone. Go back to bed. You were dreaming." Tiffany went back to bed, but she didn't dream or sleep for the rest of the night. Her favorite roommate was Josh. He dated a series of drag queens, so his overnight company was as varied as it was interesting. Shortly after moving in, his wicked sense of humor had him slipping index cards under Christie's door whenever she was particularly vocal during her frequent nighttime aerobics. He'd rate her verbal performance in accordance with how well he perceived her partner was doing. On a scale of 1 to 10, sometimes she'd see the cards slipping in under her door, and others she wouldn't find until a restroom break. Josh made a game of it, often sharing the fun with some of his special friends. There were quite a few nights when Josh would overnight elsewhere, and Christy would have the house alone, or just she and the prude would be home. It was one of those nights where she was solo. 124 days after moving in that she brought home a drummer. She was dancing to his rhythm when movement caught her eye. An index card slid beneath the door. She just smiled, thinking Josh was up to his tricks. It wasn't until day 125 that she learned Josh and Tiffany had both been out of town that night and hadn't been at home at all. On day 202, Christy heard what she swore was the bouncing of a basketball and a child's laughter from the vent behind her headboard. She chose to ignore it, roll over, and go back to sleep. On a trip to the restroom later that same night, she thought she heard the sound of a music box. Josh loses his keys. Christy can't find the remote control of her DVD player, and Tiffany's watch goes missing. They are all found sitting on the bottom step of the basement on the 221st day of residence. Tiffany's Timex had a face that showed AM and PM. It was stuck at 3 a.m., and after she replaced the battery twice, it continued to stop at 3 a.m. before she replaced the watch entirely. Day 279, smells began. They range from summertime dumpster behind a Chinese buffet to clogged toilets in a busy gas station. They were daily, unpredictable, and lasted seconds, just a waft to minutes, as many as 45. The smells seemed to emanate from and be concentrated in the basement, but they could be detected in every room in the house. The landlord finds no animals during his inspection of the entire property. Day 295. Everyone in the house began using a laundromat. Trips to the basement stop. Drip, drip. Day 326. Christy had no quarters, was home alone, and out of clean clothes. She reluctantly descended to do laundry, calling a friend on the cell phone to chat away the clammy palms and cold sweat. No unusual events occurred during her first trip to the basement. While switching clothes from the wash to the dryer, conversation stopped. Christy screamed, and the phone was dropped. A child's laughter and the sounds of a music box were clearly heard by her friend on the line. A dirty, soot-blackened basketball didn't roll out from the shadows beneath the stairs to hit her on the backs of the legs. It bounced. Bonus stories. Story 1. The Fermi Paradox. As astronomers began to dig deeper into the cosmos, a puzzling question arose. In a universe as vast and ancient as our own, why can't we find any signs of other intelligent life? We have already discovered a number of Earth-like planets, and it's estimated that there are thousands, if not millions, of planets throughout the galaxy that could support life as we know it. Presumably, at least a few would give rise to advanced alien civilizations, and we should be able to detect such civilizations by listening for radio signals that are too complex and organized to be of natural origin. After all, anyone within 100 light-years of the sun could detect us through the broadcasts emanating from Earth. So why couldn't it work the other way around? Yet whenever we listen for these signals, we only hear silence. There is nothing but the chaotic emissions of pulsars, gamma-ray bursters, and other natural sources. Scientists refer to this as the Fermi Paradox. Given the seeming statistical certainty there being alien civilizations, why can't we find any? Why do we seem to be so special? It wouldn't be a matter of signals fading over distance. We can detect the faint glow of galaxies millions of light-years away that have long since ceased to exist. There have been a number of proposed explanations. Maybe Earth truly is unique after all. Maybe aliens don't use radio waves. However, some scientists fear a different possibility. Perhaps advanced civilizations invariably destroy themselves before being able to broadcast for any meaningful amount of time. It could be nuclear war, or it could be an environmental catastrophe. Whatever it is, this theory speculates within a couple short centuries of becoming advanced enough to harness radio waves. Intelligent life is doomed to obliterate itself. The window of time during which it could send and receive radio broadcasts is but a blink of the eye on a cosmic time frame, and if the signals arrived at the world of another intelligent species, it would likely be too early or too late. If this is true, humanity simply another iteration in an infinite cycle of doomed civilizations that repeats itself all across the cosmos. Despite all our achievements and accomplishments, we will all die a painful collective death, perhaps within our lifetime. And just as we are unaware of our alien predecessors on distant worlds, future intelligent life on a system but 20 light-years away will never know we even existed. Who knows? We tried sending targeted broadcasts to various star clusters, but perhaps others did the same. We've tried securing a form of symbolic immortality by sending probes carrying our life story into interstellar space, but perhaps the universe is littered with such mementos to dead races, all launched in the same vain hope of being remembered by the cosmos. Why would we be so special? Of course, this proposal could be false. There is no real scientific evidence either way. It is all an intellectual parlor. Game for astronomers, right? Perhaps. But the next time you read about climate change, the next time you learn about how close we have come to the brink of nuclear war at times, the next time you hear about an emerging crisis with North Korea or Iran, look up at the stars and remember the Fermi Paradox. Story 2. The seed eater through the trees. I wish he would have stayed home, away from this cruel world that we live in. Dear reader, children shouldn't roam this world alone, but we can't keep them in their nest forever. My son left his room one night to the enchanted chirping outside his window, and I knew what this was, but only from my years of studying this creature. You see, there is a monster that wanders around the globe preying on innocent children, watching, waiting. I remember fondly it was September 15th, 1983. That was the year my wife and I escaped the busy world of New York to live our lives in the country, North Dakota. We lived happily there for several years until I discovered my one true love, studying the seed-eater. The seed-eater is a disturbed bird, human creature that roams the forests, stalking children, abducting them to be part of the legend. On June 19th, 1987, I first saw it sitting in my tree on my front lawn. I was in a daze when I saw it. My destiny beckoned to me, it said. Follow it, love it, learn it. Around the same time, 2 weeks later, I woke to a strange tapping noise on my front window. I knew it was him. I ran out of the house to see it sitting in the tree, just staring into my eyes. I was about to cry from the majesty of it. I remember it telling me that it wanted my help. I would do anything for it. On April 3rd, 1988, the seed-eater arrived at my window again. I was overjoyed. It said it was time. And I remember, you see, the seed-eater devours children to keep itself alive, indulging in their youth to live forever. I remember the little boy. Oh, what was his name? Oh, well, it doesn't matter. I remember going to his house and just simply knocking on the door at 4:29 a.m., but nobody would answer. I saw the bay window. It was the boy's room. I went to tell the seed-eater, let's just call him S.E. for now. He told me how to get his attention the next day. A couple of weeks went by, and the stench of the flesh was getting disgusting. Where was S.? The parents of the boy put up lost posters last week. I wonder why they didn't worrying for the first 2 weeks. Oh well, I'm not concerned. On May 14th, 1988, the boy was nothing but bloated, rotting flesh, and the S. He was nowhere to be found. I guess my services weren't needed. May 15th, 88, he came. He took the body and requested another. May 16th, 88, 6 kids killed, -1 kids devoured, 6 more requested. May 18th, 88, HIE ver losing people makes me wonder. The killer monster seed-eater came tonight. He said kids weren't doing the trick anymore. He wanted something bigger. If you're reading this, you may be the only hope of finding out the truth of this thing. In my room, there is a journal on page 49. You'll discover how to take the life out of this monster. But he's had me under a tight death grip. I couldn't do it. But maybe you'll have more strength than me. Goodbye, everybody. I hope being eaten is what I brought onto myself. Story 3, Did Boy Kill, Part 3. This is Part 3 of the Did Boy Kill series. You can read the previous installments in the link tag. Thanks to Redditors who asked not to be mentioned in this story. We think we have uncovered who has, for lack of a better term, possessed my son. I owe a great deal of gratitude to the people who linked me to this article, dated May 28, 1978, from the Eugene, Oregon Register Guard paper. Third dead teenager found in Louisiana. I have no doubt that my son has become this woman. The things he has said and the way he has said them have me thoroughly convinced. Here is a 4-year-old boy talking about prom dresses, marijuana, and her fears of sex in a perfect Southern accent. Combine that with his uncanny knowledge of events from the time in question, and I am left with little doubt. Apparently my son has become Bridget S. _, age 19, from Morgan City, Louisiana. She, along with 3 other teenagers, were bound, raped, then murdered. Ms. S. _ was eventually tied up, weighted down, and stuffed into a septic tank, only to be found several weeks after her kidnapping. I cannot fathom what she went through, and from our conversations, neither can she. As I noted in the previous entry, she only gives hints to these atrocities, waking up with great pain in her genital area or vomiting due to some phantom smell when she gets awakened from a nightmare, probably the smell of the septic tank. I haven't the foggiest idea of how to approach my son, Miss S. _ with this newfound information. After we left the hospital on the night of my son's death, we were referred to a psychiatrist for further evaluation. So we are going to seek outside help wherever we can find it. My husband and I are also Catholic, so we have put in a call to a priest who specializes in these sorts of things, from what our church has informed us. As for the next steps from there, I am at a loss as to how to approach her now that we know who she is. Then there are the really difficult questions. Do we dig further into her past and try to approach the family? The thought of doing this devastates me. Do we try to explain to her what has happened in order for her to be at peace? If we do that and she leaves, will our son die, or will another spirit take him over? Does my son, the way we knew him for years, even exist? Or was he Neimer Sr. all along? I fear that with each answer I seek it will only lead to more difficult questions. Oddly enough, these are not the questions that keep me up at night. Only one question does, and it comes to mind because of this second article that a Redditor found for me. Police officer sought car, found fugitive. Now that I know who her killer was, what he has done, what he looks like, and the fact that he is dead, I fear he will search for my son, just like Neimer Jr. did. How do you stop a murdering rapist, pederast, ghoul from hunting down a 4-year-old boy? My 4-year-old boy story for More Than Historical Monument. Somewhere in Brooklyn, New York, exists a narrow, old-style 12-story building. It looks as though it was built sometime in the late 1800s or early 1900s. However, the only documentation of the building was in the early 1900s, when it was first noticed. Nobody really knows where this building came from, but nobody has really bothered to tear it down or do anything with it for as long as it's been around. In May 1902, a couple of teenage kids explored the building. Inside, they found a single hallway on each floor of the building. Down each hall, there were several doors on each side of the hall. On some floors, there were 31 doors. On others, 30. One even had 28 doors. All the doors, the halls, and the stairwells appeared to be very worn out. For some reason, all the doors had the same rusty labels on them. The label read 1902, and they were all unlocked. All the rooms looked to be the same, old, dusty, and appearing to fall apart. The first 5 floors of the building were the same, but the teens said that they couldn't go down the whole 5th floor hallway. They said that there was something about it that seemed to give them chills, practically immobilizing them. For months later, they went mad and committed suicide. After this incident, local scientists began to conduct experiments concerning the building. They sent in mental patients for a period of time. then observe their behavior for a period of 6 months afterwards. All but 3 patients were able to emerge from the haunted building. It has officially been reported that only the truly heartless and insane are able to go into the building and emerge unharmed, considering that they were already insane before they went in. The building still stands today. It's just that not many people can locate it. A small group of ghost hunters in December 2008 located this building, thinking that its phenomena was the result of ghosts. Go figure. When they went inside, it still looked the same way it was reported over 100 years ago. There's just a few slight differences. 1. All the labels on the door, although still rusty, no longer read 1902. They now read 2008. 2. There appeared to be an extra room on the second floor of the building. It was still the same as all the other rooms. However, 3. The ghost hunters were able to make it to the last floor of the building before that same chilling feeling set into them. 4. There were 3 doors this time around that were locked. Their locations are: 1. On the 6th floor, the 28th door down the hall is locked. Its label reads 1914, and the smell of death seeps out from under the door. 2. On the 9th floor, the first door is also locked. Its label reads 1939. And it also reeks of death, and a German swastika can be seen carved into the door. 3. Also on the 9th floor, the 11th door down the hall is locked. Its label reads 2001, and a light layer of smoke can be seen drifting out from under the door. In February 2009, the team of ghost hunters were admitted into a mental institute for violent and abrupt behaviors. They have been deemed insane. Nobody really knows what evil surrounds this building, but if I were you, I wouldn't go looking for it. Story 5. The Dark Wraith. Most of the information known about these spirits is unsurprisingly dubious at best, as the survivors have often been paranoid to the extent of insanity. From what I have seen, the commonalities of past victims include staying within the light, becoming terrified of any unexpected noise, and jumping at merely the flicker of a candle, the worst of which is their fear of shadows, even their own. If they are unavoidably forced into darkness, they will enter a state of hysteria. However, I once met a man who had claimed to have survived one of these creatures and yet still be in a reasonable state of mind while most fear for their lives. This man had a peculiar peace about him. He was old and worn, and despite his grim experiences, he had a sort of gentle kindness about him. Herein I have recounted the details that he has described to me. At being a fair distance from these creatures, only slight anomalies occur. These are notably characteristics which correspond to the paranoia of the survivors: unnatural flickering of candles, and occasionally the slight movement of a shadow. He hesitated to proclaim any area safe, but he stated this was most likely the safest distance one could be from them. At about a mid-range distance from the creature, the anomalies become more significant and exaggerated. He made certain to point out that this spirit did not seem to desire to actually be noticed, but its murderous intent was all but obvious upon being within proximity to it. He stated that if someone must come this close, then they should not advance without multiple sources of light. Naturally, torches should also be used instead of lanterns or candles, as the spirit was capable of extinguishing dim light within this vicinity. The easiest way to distinguish between this range and the prior that the movements of shadows become more frequent and dramatic in nature. This man has also described the shadows as morphing into the silhouette of a woman, and generally only the shadows that were within the peripheral vision were prone to movement. And finally, the man described to me the signs of being within close proximity to the spirit. Shadows began to dance wildly, often leaping from one to another, dispelling any previous subtlety. All light sources are under constant assault by slow-moving yet unnaturally cold air, which consequently exaggerates the movement of shadows. He said it was important to never stay still while at this range, as the shadows would quickly begin to engulf any immobile person. The spirit's method of killing was naturally unknown, but upon being completely immersed in darkness, victims are known to often emit screams prior to being cut off entirely, shortly followed thereafter by the joyous laughter of a woman, which quickly warps into an inhuman voice. Yet if darkness does entirely encompass someone, the man said it was still not necessarily a guarantor of death. He called this spirit a patient hunter, and she would only kill when she had the perfect opportunity and had not recently attained any prey. He attributed the reason that he was able to survive to this fact, and at this time I noticed that he wore a pained expression. Thus I thanked him for the sharing of his account and excused him. Story 6. I like quiet. As I walked into my local library, I felt at peace. Some people are addicted to heroin. I am addicted to literature. I love the way libraries are so organized. Not only are books separated by genre, but are also placed in alphabetical order. Beyond the placements of books, the library is a place of poetry, a place of silence. I like the quiet atmosphere. Some find this insipid, but they are mad. I search the shelves for an arousing story. With so many different choices, this could be an appalling task. How can I possibly choose? I browse many different sections, coming across the horror section. Today was a good day for something truly malevolent. Finding one, I go towards the common area and sit near a young lady. She wore a tightly fitted white blouse and skinny jeans. Her hair flowed past her shoulders. Her facial features are soft, and enjoyment radiated from her. I found her attractive. When I began reading, I kept catching myself staring at her, but as the novel went on, I became more fascinated by the story. Such majestic writing. My heart raced as the lawyer approached Mr. I. A group of young adults walked into the library, yelling and cheering at each other. They are ignoring etiquette. Sometimes, and only sometimes, while I am reading a tale, a baby or a child or even an adult cries, screams, or yells. It ruins the story, makes me frustrated. It takes me away from my mysterious island. My blood begins to boil from indignation. My heartbeat slows down, becoming louder and louder until everyone can hear it. I know they can hear it because everyone stares at me. Everyone looks at me laughing. Their eyes scream at me, humiliating me. I will show them all. One of these days I will rip their voice boxes out. One of these days I will gouge their eyes out. I will laugh as blood drips from my hands. I am not mad. Why and how can you say that I am mad? My mind is sharpened. It has not diminished. I can and will kill them. I will do it so slowly and quietly. No madman would be able to accomplish what I will do with such skill, such organization. The silence will be so that Stevenson, Verne, or Poe could not write such beauty and would find this to be egregiousness. But today is not the day. Maybe tomorrow. Today is most definitely not organized. I shrug and closed my book. Today I will not have my time of rest. Soon there will be silence, but not today. I took another glance at the attractive lady. Her blouse was red. Her eyes showed consternation. What a shame she was. Such a beauty. I would have loved to take her home, but I'm positive that she was wearing a white blouse when I sat down. I cannot be with someone so disorganized. But she is quiet. I like that. I walked past her, walking towards the bookshelf to replace A Strange Story. I had to step over a body. His face looked panicked. I would be too if my larynx was lying next to me. More importantly, he was quiet. I like that. Story 7. Did Boy kill? He killed them all. This is part 5 and the last installment of the Did Boy Kill series. You can read the previous installments in the link tag. They are dead. They are all fucking dead. My husband, damn the Catholic and voodoo priests. Dr. Hamani. Everyone, and it's my fault and your fault. All you fucking Redditors, snooping and prying and searching and meddling. I'll say this. You all are a resourceful, twisted bunch. Everything from articles to incantations to recommendations for shrinks, priests, and doctors flooded my PM box since I was desperate enough to try anything and everything I could read. I found myself trying to hide the mess, a bloody mess created by your need to meddle. And now these friends are all dead. I can't even be thankful for the one thing those incantations you all sent me did. They brought my son back to me. The only problem, the biggest of problems really, was that the real Timmy Jr. was the problem. Come to find out, my son as a gift or a curse depending which side of the coin on which you land. Turns out the reason my son's body was possessed by those to murder victims was because he placed them there. Call him a demon, a reaper, a summoner. Who cares anymore? All I know is that my son, my true son, isn't what I remembered him to be, and perhaps he never was. Looking back, I should have known all along that he was evil reincarnate. It would have been better to have Neimer Sr. and Bridget around. There were signs, animal abuse, speaking in tongues though. I thought it was just kid gibberish, the cutting. And this was before the first possession. It's not worth getting into the details anymore. It only excites you all further, and that is all this was. For you all, my family's torture was just your entertainment. What in the hell was I thinking coming to you people? I'll end this by just mentioning how amazingly creative a 4-year-old murderer can be. Lock up your household chemicals and knife set. One would have to be creative to be able to pull victims within his own human form only to relive their murders again, decades after they happened. What kind of vile evil finds enjoyment from something like that? It is probably the same reason he kept me alive, for the torture of it. It's probably why he picked that poor Bridget girl. The abuse and the torture and the septic tank. It has left me no choice but to question my faith now. If there is a God, he will understand why I did what I did. He will know it was what needed to be done. Redditors, cops, whoever reads this, please consider this my confession letter. While I did not kill everyone that is currently rotting in my basement, I am the one who killed the boy on the race car bed, and I'll be the one lying on the floor next to him. Sincerely, Sarah. P.S. Mom and Dad, I am so sorry. Please forgive me, and please believe me when I say that it was the only choice I love you both so much.